Hello everybody, it's Emma here and welcome back to my YouTube channel. As you can probably tell by today's title, I have been working on a little bit of an essay for the last week all about the topic of keeping up with the Joneses and talking about that in relation to today and social media and overconsumption, kind of looking a little bit about where it came from, a bit about where the phrase came from and how it really resonates with today and modern society. So without further ado, let's get into it and let's delve into this topic. If I keep looking in this direction over here, it is because my laptop is there and I do have all my notes compiled on there so that I don't forget everything. So yes, anyway, let's get into a bit more background context. Where did the phrase actually come from? The phrase was first coined in 1913. It was featured in a comic strip that was given the exact same title, published in the New York World. The comic strip actually ran pretty impressively until 1940, which I guess it probably stopped being featured because of the Second World War. That would be my guess. And it actually was that famous. It did run in quite a few various newspaper outlets, which is pretty cool. So what did the actual comic strip entail? So it depicted the McGinnis family, who basically are in this absolute struggle to keep up with their neighbours. So they are keep buying things and are kind of getting into debt because they're trying to keep up with their neighbours. I do find it really interesting, and I haven't done my research into this bit, so I don't know whether the author of the comic strip actually said anything, but Jones's family is actually undepicted. So they aren't ever really an actual entity within this comic strip, other than it just being suggested. And I actually wonder whether this was done on purpose to perhaps suggest that sometimes the idea of keeping up with your neighbours and that sort of feeling is actually in our heads versus it being an actual thing. Anyway, that gives a little bit of the background behind the comic strip and behind the phrase. Obviously, the comic strip is no longer running, but that saying has remained in popular culture since then, and there's even been a film with the same title, which just goes to show how important it is in even today's society. A phrase that I think will be super duper important for this video is conspicuous consumption. This phrase often gets related to the same phrase of keeping up with the Joneses. I know what you're thinking, what does it mean? It's a term used to describe people who care about their standard of living and its appearance in comparison to their peers. So it's the idea that people basically only care about having the latest item, not because they actually really want it, but because their friends and to their friends and peers it looks cool, basically. I really think this could represent that although the year has changed and we are no longer in 1913, humans have actually not really evolved and we all have that craving to have the shiniest, latest thing, not because we really want it, but because society has deemed that we should want it and it's a desirable item. But why is this? So I definitely think there is a lot of history that comes to play here, and although you could probably date it back from medieval, early modern sort of period, I'm going to talk a little bit more about it in the more modern and postmodern context, which is consumerism, kind of similar to how we know it today. That started growing in the 1950s. Now obviously a lot of that happened because of it being post-World War II, rationing in Britain, a lot of rationing like eggs, sweets even, came to end in like 1952 and 53. Television sets massively increased during this period. It started in Britain generally around the Queen's coronation and then just massively spiraled after that. Also in the US, consumerism massively increased. It was the introduction of the credit card, so that gave people another option of being able to buy all these new things without necessarily having to pay it off straight away. And the 1950s is where capitalism basically erupted. They had loads of new gadgets, washing machines and new cars, and obviously, like I said, television sets, which all were introduced kind of during this period. And because people had a lot more extra income to spend, it meant that people were able to buy these items, whereas the previous decade they couldn't. Just to give you a little statistic, which I always enjoy, and I am going to focus about TV for the next section for just a little bit. In the United States, between the decade 1960 and 1970, TV ownership in household, each household that had at least one television, from 88% at the start of the decade to 96% by the end of it. So you're talking at that point, basically pretty much every household had a TV within their homes, had at least one TV within their homes. Now, why am I focusing on television specifically? Two reasons. One, because they're actually really important for being a kind of catapult into commercials and advertisements and marketing. So all of these items like washing machines and other kitchen gadgets, for example, were all being shown to everybody, and it depicted the way that middle class people should live, and it kind of meant that these items were shown as being desirable and needed and wanted. The second reason is that the TVs became a product that was used as a way for us to basically compete with one another. And with all of that background aside, let's get into the 21st century, because let's be honest, the problem now compared to previous decades, it was kind of easier in some ways to not keep up with the Joneses, because yes, they might have a brand new car or a brand new television set, you knew your neighbours, and you knew the demand that it took for them to afford that item. So yes, they might have a better car than you, but you also could look out your window and see that they were constantly getting into fights. You can see that they are not living a perfect, happy life. So just because they had that new item, that doesn't necessarily mean their entire life is perfect and desirable. However, with the growth of social media that is now, that area has become very much a grey and blurry area, because with everyone trying to create... You'll have to bear with me. I know the audio is a little choppy. I'll try and fix it next time. What I'm trying to say here is, whilst everyone's trying to create the most perfect life on Instagram Reels and TikTok, and the unrealistic hauls that have decided to spawn on YouTube, it becomes really hard to distinguish the reality from the created. And not only that, but you feel a lot more pressure than you did previously to keep up with the trends, because unlike before, where the trends were just confined to your local neighbourhoods, now we're exposed to different expectations and different trends on a more global scale. So social media has caused to become even worse than they had before, and part of that is the beginning of the micro trend. If you're unfamiliar what a micro trend is, it's basically something that doesn't become a full trend. It's something that exists for just a short period. So it's not enough to generate into a massive trend, but it exists for a little bit. You might think of certain things such as the Adidas Sambas, the niche example, but they were very popular for a little bit, for a few weeks. We've also now moved on to a new trainer, which Adidas trainer that's become popular. Not that I can remember which type it is, because there's that many. You might also think about things such as leopard print. If you've been to a clothing shop in the last 6 months, leopard print is everywhere. It's now also everywhere in the reduced section. I literally went to Sainsbury's, which is a UK supermarket, and within that sales section was a lot of leopard print. But all of this, although I'm laughing about it, all of this has resulted in a mass overconsumption. One of the many issues of mass overconsumption is the way that they make you feel, because they make you feel like you should go and spend your money on a silly little trainer. But why? Well, it's simple really, because everyone else has it, and although we all like to believe that we are different, the resounding feeling of not wanting to be left out, wanting to not fit in, means that we are constantly seeking out the latest item that is desirable, and it does end up leading to us replacing our wardrobes every 3-6 months, sometimes even shorter than that. Now obviously this has a massive environmental impact. I'm not gonna focus too much into this video, but there are many videos out that talk about overconsumption in relation to the environment and the poor effects that this is having on the planet. I am tempted to do something similar and talk about it. I should say, realistically, not everyone is doing this. Not everyone is keeping up with all these micro trends and all these trends in general, me included. Because firstly, in the current state of the economy, most of us cannot afford to keep up with the constant trends, unless we're influencers that get gifted, or unless we keep up with horrendous loans to afford it. But equally, why should I go and buy a new t-shirt or a new pair of trainers from the latest brand just because it's stylish when I've got 5 of the t-shirts and 3 of the pairs of trainers that all serve the same purpose? There's absolutely no point. However, overconsumption has easily become the norm of the 2020s, partly helped by the early years of being locked inside our homes and us trying to fill the void of going outside. So unfortunately, social media has not helped, and the way that it's involved means that it's really hard to see the reality behind every person's post. Unlike before, where we could see our neighbours dealing with car loans and getting into quite a lot of debt, this becomes easily lost on social media. It becomes easy to feel like we are being left behind, and I'm constantly questioning as we are scrolling how people can afford this whilst I can't afford my little sweet treat on the way home. I have had to resort into holding my microphone because it was going a bit cackly. Anyway, whenever I scroll social media and I have these feelings, I do try and remind myself that I am not seeing the full picture. I am not seeing the amount of debt that people are getting themselves into just to be able to afford a new designer handbag and the latest gadget or the latest phones. So I think it's really important for now. I'm going to stick with my level of consumption and being really careful about what I'm actually spending my money on. I also think it's important to sometimes take a step back from social media and really realise that actually I'm not left behind just compared to my friends because I don't own the new latest item, because I'm not conforming to the trend. And I actually think it's way more freeing when you are not conforming to that trend and when you're actually just buying items because you have really, really wanted it. I get way more satisfaction from buying an item that I have wanted for a really long time versus actually just buying an item to conform to a trend. So, in a world that is created for materialism and overconsumption, I do urge you as the audience to think about your level of consumption and to think about how you yourself are being involved in social media. Because believe it or not, I think a lot of this, whether we realise it, do sometimes conform to the trend or societal norms. And I'm not saying that you have to be completely defiant, but I think it's important to realise that are you conforming to these trends because you want to, or are you conforming to these trends and these ideas because everybody else wants you to? So I also urge you to be cautious about what you see online. Not everything is presented as this perfect image that you see before you. In a world of keeping up the Jonses, where that phrase is more relatable than ever, I'm going to just keep up trying to afford the necessities to live. I want to do a cheeky little plug here because everything that I've said in this video, I have actually written in a Substack post. So if you would like to go read it, I will leave it in the description below for you guys to go and check out. If you have any other themes or ideas that you would like me to talk about, I do have a kind of a list of things I would like to write about, so please feel free to send them my way and I will definitely add them on. I would really appreciate it if you could go and leave a like and possibly think about subscribing if you have enjoyed this content, because I would love to do more. And please feel free to leave a comment. I am always up for a very nice discussion. I want to wholeheartedly thank you for spending some time with me today, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day or evening wherever you are. So thank you, and I hope to see you all next time. Bye everyone.